Everyone thought the waves had claimed her. The stepdaughter, wanting quiet, gentle, the only child of the late billionaire, whose wealth now sat under her stepmother's control. After her father's death, the stepmother made her life hell. She wanted everything: the mansion, the company, the inheritance, for herself and her two sons. So one stormy night, during a family trip by the coast, she tripped. No witnesses, just screams swallowed by the sea. The next morning, a press release went out. Tragic accident. Body unrecovered. The stepmother wore black for 3 days, then red on the fourth. 10 years later, in her high-rise office, she didn't look twice when a timid woman walked in to apply for a cleaner's position, until she heard her voice. That voice, that face, those eyes she thought the ocean had buried forever. The color drained from her face. Her pen fell. You're supposed to be, the woman smiled faintly. Dead? I was, until I remembered what was mine. This is the story of betrayal, survival, and a return that turned fear into justice. What do you think happened next? Hello, family. Welcome back. Before we begin, I have a small but heartfelt request, please. Subscribe. Your support is what keeps these stories alive. Every time you click that button, you're helping us share voices that would otherwise be forgotten and stories that deserve to be heard. And in the comments, tell us where you're watching from, because together we are not just telling stories, we are keeping hope alive. The rain came before dawn, a slow drizzle that turned the sky into a dull gray sheet. The city was still waking when Isabella Hawthorne stepped out of the cab and stared at the gates of her late father's mansion. It was strange to call it her father's now. Everything about it felt cold, like it already belonged to someone else. The iron gates that once opened wide for her seemed to stare her down like guards deciding whether to let her in. She clutched her suitcase tighter, her knuckles pale. 10 years of her father's laughter, her mother's memory, the warmth of her childhood, all buried behind those black gates. And now behind them was a woman who smiled at funerals and called herself family. The guard recognized her immediately and pressed the button to open the gate. Miss Isabella, he said softly, almost whispering, we didn't think you'd come back so soon. I had to, she replied, forcing a smile. It's still my home, and isn't it? The guard looked away, avoiding her eyes. That was enough of an answer. When Isabella entered the mansion, the smell of her father's cologne was gone. The air smelled different, like expensive candles and polished floors. The framed photos that once lined the hallway were gone, replaced with abstract art. Her father's favorite chair in the living room had been moved, and in its place sat Victoria Hawthorne, dressed in black silk, sipping coffee as if she owned the air itself. Oh, Victoria said, looking up with mock surprise. You're back. I thought you'd stay in school until the end of the semester. Isabella stood still, the words catching in her throat. I couldn't focus on classes after Dad's funeral. I came to help with things, Victoria smiled faintly. Things? Everything is already under control, dear. The lawyers, the board, the house staff, everyone knows what to do. Isabella dropped her suitcase beside the stairs. That's funny. No one told me there was a board meeting after the funeral. Dad would have wanted me there. Sweetheart, Victoria said, setting down her cup, your father wouldn't have wanted you stressing about business. You're young. You have your whole life ahead of you. Let me handle the complicated parts. Something about the word sweetheart made Isabella's stomach turn. Victoria's smile didn't reach her eyes, it never had. It was the kind of smile that said, I win. Before Isabella could respond, two figures appeared at the top of the stairs. Ethan and Liam, her stepbrothers. Ethan descended first, his tie loose, his phone in hand, his smirk ready. Well, look who the ocean didn't swallow yet, he said. Little Miss Law School is back to take notes. Ethan, Victoria warned, though her tone was more amused than disapproving. Liam followed more quietly, his eyes softer. Isabella, hey, he said, his voice low. It's good to see you again. She nodded politely. You too, Liam. He was the only one who had ever treated her with any decency, though she could never tell if it was kindness or guilt. Victoria stood and walked toward Isabella, her heels clicking against the marble floor. I know you're grieving, darling. We all are. But your father's passing came with responsibilities. The company can't stop. The world won't stop. We have to move forward. Isabella studied her face. Calm, composed, untouched by loss. You moved forward very fast, she said quietly. For a moment, Victoria's eyes hardened, but only for a second. Then she laughed lightly. Well, someone has to keep the ship from sinking. Later that evening, Isabella wandered into her father's study. It had always been her favorite room. Mahogany shelves, soft lamps, the faint smell of ink and wood polish. But something was wrong. The desk drawers were empty, the walls stripped of personal photos. The safe in the corner was gone. Gone. Her chest tightened. She turned to the door, startled when Liam's voice broke the silence. You shouldn't be in here, he said gently. He stood at the doorway, hands in his pockets. Why? She asked, her voice sharper than intended. Because it used to be my father's room? He sighed. Because Mom doesn't like anyone going through his things right now. She already went through them, Isabella snapped. The safe's missing, the files are gone, and she's acting like this house was hers all along. Liam hesitated. Look, Isabella, I'm not defending her. But maybe it's best to let her handle things for now. Isabella turned on him. You mean let her take everything? Please, he said softly, stepping closer. Don't start something you can't finish. Her throat tightened. You sound like you're warning me. He met her gaze, conflicted. I am. When he left, she sank into her father's chair. She remembered the last words he'd said to her before he died. If anything ever happens to me, don't trust anyone too quickly. She hadn't understood then. Now she did. The next few days were strange. The mansion was full of movement, but empty of warmth. Victoria had people in and out, accountants, lawyers, reporters. When Isabella tried to speak with them, Victoria always intercepted. She's not feeling well, Victoria would say sweetly. Still grieving. One evening, Isabella overheard a conversation outside Victoria's study. Ethan was laughing. She's asking too many questions, he said. You think she's going to find out? Let her ask, Victoria replied. She won't find anything. And even if she does, no one will believe her. Something cold spread through Isabella's chest. She waited until the footsteps faded, then crept into the study. The room smelled like perfume and ink. Papers were stacked neatly on the desk, but one folder caught her eye. It had her father's signature on the cover, or rather something that looked like his signature. Her pulse quickened. She flipped the pages and saw transfer papers, company shares, property rights, all signed and dated 2 days before his death. But the signature, it wasn't his handwriting. She knew every curve of his pen, and this wasn't it. The floor creaked. Isabella froze. Victoria stood by the door, her expression unreadable. What are you doing? Victoria asked softly. I should be asking you that, Isabella said, her voice trembling but steady. These signatures aren't Dad's. Victoria stepped closer, her heels slow and deliberate. You're tired. Grief can make you see things differently. I'm not blind, Isabella snapped. I know what his handwriting looks like. Victoria stopped in front of her, so close Isabella could smell her perfume, sweet and poisonous. Be careful, Isabella, she said quietly. Curiosity killed more than cats. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then Victoria's lips curled into a thin smile. Why don't we take a break? There's too much tension here. Let's all go to the coast for a few days. The air will do us good. The way she said it made Isabella's skin crawl. Still, she nodded slowly. Fine. Maybe some air will clear things up. Victoria smiled wider. Good girl. That night, Isabella packed her bag but couldn't sleep. The wind howled outside, tapping against her window like fingers. She stared into the dark, her heart heavy with dread. Something deep inside whispered that this trip wouldn't end the way Victoria promised. 2 days later, the family drove out to the coast. The sea was restless, the sky gray. The mansion by the cliff looked more like a fortress than a vacation home. Waves crashed against the rocks far below, wild and angry. Victoria seemed unusually cheerful, laughing at everything, playing music, pouring wine. Ethan was loud as ever. Liam stayed quiet, watching the sea. Isabella sat at the edge of the balcony that evening, watching the sunset bleed into the water. Liam approached her with 2 cups of tea. You don't look like you're enjoying the trip, he said. I didn't come here to enjoy anything, she replied. Did you? He looked at her for a moment, then shook his head. No. She took a sip and said quietly, Liam, if something happens to me, will you tell the truth? He frowned. Why would something happen to you? Because your mother doesn't take chances, she said, her eyes on the horizon. And she doesn't lose. He didn't answer. Later that night, thunder rolled across the sea. The storm came fast, fierce. The lights flickered as rain lashed the windows. Isabella heard voices in the hallway. Victoria and Ethan arguing. Something about documents. Something about risk. She stepped out of her room, heart pounding, following the voices to the cliffside terrace. Victoria stood there in the wind, her dress whipping in the storm. Isabella called out, Why did you bring me here? Victoria turned slowly. Her face was calm, but her eyes were sharp. You shouldn't have gone through my files. So it's true, Isabella shouted over the wind. You forged his signature. Victoria laughed, the sound carried by the storm. Your father was already dying. I just made sure his empire didn't die with him. You killed him. Victoria's smile didn't falter. He was weak. You're weak. I built everything you're standing on. Isabella took a step closer, her hands trembling. You'll go to prison for this. Victoria's expression softened strangely, almost like pity. Oh, darling, she whispered. You won't live long enough to see that. The next flash of lightning painted everything in white. Isabella barely saw it coming. The shove, the scream, the air rushing past her ears. She felt herself falling, the world spinning into black water. The ocean swallowed her cry, cold and endless. The sea was merciless. The wind tore at the waves, dragging Isabella deeper into its cold black throat. She fought, arms flailing, lungs burning, but the ocean didn't care. Salt water rushed into her mouth, stinging her throat. She tried to scream, but the sound vanished beneath the roar of thunder. Her body hit something hard, rock maybe, and pain shot through her ribs. The current pulled again, twisting her limbs like a rag doll. Her mind screamed for air. Please, not like this. Images flashed through her mind. Her father's smile, her childhood laughter in the garden, his voice reading bedtime stories when storms frightened her. You're strong, Bella, he used to say. You're stronger than the storm. She kicked upward, desperate for the surface, her fingers scraping against the endless dark. Then at last her face broke through. She gasped, choking, coughing water, the taste of salt and blood mixing on her tongue. Lightning cracked across the sky, revealing jagged cliffs above her, the place she'd fallen from. For a split second, she saw a shadow up there, a woman, watching, Victoria. Even from below, Isabella could see her, calm, poised, holding an umbrella as if the storm was nothing. And then she turned away. Something inside Isabella broke then, not her body, but her heart. The last of her fear turned into something colder. Not hate, something sharper, something that would wait. The waves slammed her again, dragging her under. She tried to hold her breath, but her strength was gone. Everything went dim. The thunder grew distant, her body numb. Then, silence. For a moment she thought maybe she was gone, floating in some endless quiet, light fading away. But even as her body sank, her mind whispered one thing over and over. I can't die like this. Not before she pays. Her fingers brushed something, a wooden plank drifting in the water. She grabbed it weakly, clinging to it with the last thread of strength left in her shaking hands. The waves carried her farther from the cliffs, away from the mansion, away from everything she had known. The storm raged for hours. At some point, she stopped fighting and let the current take her. When she opened her eyes again, it was daylight. The sky was pale and still, clouds parting slowly. Her lips were cracked, her body trembling from cold. She floated near a fishing boat anchored close to the shore, its nets swaying gently in the waves. A man's voice shouted faintly through the fog. Hey, is someone out there? She tried to speak but only coughed. The sound caught his attention. The man, tall, middle-aged, his beard flecked with gray, leaned over the side of his boat. His eyes widened. "Dear Lord," he muttered, pulling up his net to reach her. "Hold on, miss. Don't let go." She couldn't feel her hands anymore, couldn't tell if she was holding or slipping. The man hooked his arm under hers and hauled her up, grunting with effort. Water poured off her clothes as he dragged her into the boat. She collapsed on the floor, shivering violently, coughing up seawater. Her vision blurred. The fisherman wrapped his coat around her shoulders and tapped her cheeks lightly. "Hey, stay with me, all right? You hear me?" Her lips moved, but no sound came. He shook his head, talking mostly to himself. "No one comes this far out in a storm." "What were you doing, girl?" Isabella's mind flickered. She saw flashes of everything. Her father's study, the forged papers, Victoria's smile, the push, the fall. She wanted to tell him her name, to beg him to call the police. But her tongue was heavy, her voice trapped somewhere between the pain and the salt. The man steered the boat toward the harbor, shouting orders to a boy on shore. "Get the blanket." "She's half drowned." The boy ran to fetch it, while the fisherman glanced down at her again. "You're lucky," he said softly. "Another hour in that water and the sea would have taken you." Lucky. The word echoed in her head, almost cruelly. She closed her eyes, trying to keep them open but failing. Her body was too weak, her mind too heavy. Yet beneath the exhaustion, something burned, a steady pulsing flame that wouldn't die. She wasn't sure if it was hate or hunger or grief. Maybe it was all three. The fisherman pulled the boat closer to the dock, jumping out to tie the rope. When he looked back, he saw her staring up at the sky, her lips moving faintly. He leaned closer, straining to hear. "What was that?" he asked. Her eyes, half open, caught the light for the first time. There was something fierce in them now, something no storm could wash away. Her voice was a whisper, cracked and low but clear enough to chill the air. "She'll wish I never survived." Then her head fell back against the boards, her hand slipping from the edge of the blanket. The fisherman froze, staring at her face. The bruises, the salt on her skin, the strength still clinging to her like armor. He didn't know who she was or what nightmare she'd come from, but as he carried her ashore, he felt the weight of something heavy and unfinished in the air. Behind them, the sea was calm again. The storm had passed, but the real one was just beginning. If you haven't subscribed yet, we'd love for you to join our community by hitting the subscribe button. Through our stories, we build hope and give a future to children and women who have been abused all over the world. Motivate us by subscribing and turning on your notification bell so you never miss a story that matters. Also, let us know in the comments, where are you watching from and how did this story speak to you? The smell of salt and medicine filled the room before Isabella even opened her eyes. For a long time she lay still, afraid that if she moved, she might wake up back in the ocean. Everything hurt, her ribs, her throat, her lungs. She felt like the sea had scraped its name into her bones. When she finally blinked, the ceiling above her was low and wooden, painted the color of old sand. Sunlight slipped through cracks in the shutters, soft and golden. A woman's voice drifted through the room. "You're awake." Thank God, Isabella turned her head slowly. A middle-aged woman sat beside her, stirring a bowl of soup. Her hair was streaked with silver, her eyes kind but sharp, like someone who had seen enough pain to stop being afraid of it. "You almost didn't make it," the woman said. "When Samuel pulled you from the water, I thought you were gone. But you kept breathing, slow but steady, like you weren't ready to go." Isabella's lips were dry, her voice hoarse. "Where am I?" "Seaview Village," the woman replied. "Tiny place. Fishermen, old folks, no gossip worth repeating. I'm Marla." She smiled a little, handing Isabella a spoon. "You don't need to talk much yet. Just eat. You'll get stronger." The soup was warm, and it made her chest ache, but she ate anyway. Each swallow tasted like survival. Marla watched her closely. "What were you doing out there in that storm?" "No boat, no life jacket, nothing." Isabella hesitated. The truth felt too heavy to say out loud. "I fell," she whispered. "Off a cliff?" Marla asked softly. When Isabella didn't answer, Marla nodded to herself. "You don't have to tell me right now. Whatever happened, you're safe here. No one knows your name. No one will find you. Those words hit Isabella like a wave she didn't expect. No one will find you. For the first time, that sounded like a gift. Days turned into weeks. Marla nursed her carefully, changing bandages, feeding her, helping her walk again. The old house by the sea became a cocoon. It creaked when the wind blew, and sometimes rain leaked through the ceiling, but it felt more like home than the mansion ever did. Isabella tried not to think about the world beyond those walls, but the memories crept in at night. The cliff, the scream, the way Victoria watched without blinking. Some nights she woke, shaking, gasping, clawing at the sheets like she was drowning again. Marla would rush in, sit on the bed, and press a hand over her chest. "Breathe, child," she'd whisper. "You're here now. The sea took you, but it gave you back." Don't waste that one morning. Marla walked in holding a newspaper folded under her arm. "You might want to see this." Isabella took it slowly. Her fingers trembled when she saw the headline. "Tragedy at Sea. Isabella Hawthorne presumed dead." Beneath it, a photo of Victoria in black, wiping tears at a press conference. Ethan stood beside her, solemn and handsome for the cameras. The article painted Victoria as the grieving widow who had lost her husband and stepdaughter within months. The public adored her for her strength. The piece mentioned how she'd inherited full control of the Hawthorne Group, promising to honor her husband's legacy. Isabella's vision blurred, but not from tears. It was fury, quiet, controlled, white-hot fury. Marla folded the paper and set it aside. "That her?" Isabella nodded. "That's her." "You want revenge?" Marla asked plainly. Isabella's voice was low. "I want justice." Marla studied her for a long time. Then she nodded once, like she understood completely. "Then first, you heal. After that, you learn. And when you're ready, you fight." She kept her promise. Months later, when Isabella was strong enough to stand on her own again, Marla took her to the small library near the harbor. She introduced her to a retired lawyer named Mr. Garrett, who volunteered there on weekends. He had a crooked back and a mind sharper than glass. When Marla told him Isabella was good with details, he laughed. "We'll see about that," he said, handing her an old law book. Within weeks, he stopped laughing. Isabella devoured every page. Contracts, inheritance law, fraud cases, anything that could explain how her father's empire had been stolen, while everyone smiled at the cameras. Garrett taught her the logic of justice. Marla taught her patience. "You don't strike when you're angry," Marla said once as they shelled beans by the window. "You strike when you're ready. That's when it hurts the most." The name Isabella Hawthorne was dead to the world. So when Mr. Garrett asked what to call her for class registration, she paused. "Ella," she said finally. "Ella Brooks." It felt strange on her tongue at first, but it also felt right, like someone she could become. Years passed quietly. Ella worked part-time in the village market, studied law by lantern light, and kept every piece of information she could find about Victoria. She watched her rise from widow to one of the most powerful CEOs in the city. Every newspaper article, every televised interview became fuel for her. She clipped them and kept them in a small box under her bed, labeled "Debt Unpaid." Sometimes she'd sit by the shore, staring at the horizon, whispering, "I'm coming back. You just won't see me coming." When she graduated from law school, Marla and Mr. Garrett were the only ones in the crowd who knew her real story. After the ceremony, Garrett patted her shoulder. "What will you do now?" Ella smiled faintly. "Learn everything about her world." From the outside and over the next few years, she did exactly that. She worked quietly in small firms, never staying too long, but always near enough to the circles that led back to the Hawthorne Group. She learned names, numbers, shell companies. She traced Victoria's fingerprints through legal loopholes and offshore accounts that most lawyers never noticed. Each discovery was another piece of the puzzle, and yet revenge wasn't her only motivation anymore. The more she learned, the more she realized her father's death hadn't just been about greed, it was about fear. He'd been planning to expose something, and Victoria couldn't let that happen. Ella found fragments of old reports, missing financial records, and confidential memos that hinted at secret deals between Victoria and government contractors. None of it was enough for court, but it was enough to know she was on the right trail. Still, every victory carried a sting. Some nights she'd sit in her apartment, the news playing softly, and hear Liam's name mentioned. He'd become a company executive, often by Victoria's side during events. He always looked tired, a little haunted. She told herself she didn't care, but a small part of her still remembered the boy who once handed her tea on the balcony before everything shattered. Then one night, she found something that broke whatever mercy she had left. In a recorded interview, a reporter asked Liam about Isabella's death. He hesitated, then said, "She struggled with depression. She wasn't stable after our father died. The accident, it wasn't anyone's fault." Ella froze, staring at the screen. Her chest tightened, her pulse quickened, but her face stayed cold. He had given Victoria exactly what she needed, a public story that made Isabella the problem. The lie sealed the narrative forever. Marla found her sitting in silence hours later, her eyes hard. "What happened?" she asked gently. "Nothing," Ella said, then quieter. "Everything." Marla studied her face. "You ready to go back, aren't you?" Ella looked out the window at the night sky. "Not yet. I'm still missing one thing." "What's that?" "The right moment," Marla smiled sadly. "You'll know when it comes." Years moved on. The world forgot about Isabella Hawthorne completely. But one morning, 10 years after the night she drowned, Ella sat in her small apartment, scrolling through job listings. When she saw the name the Hawthorne Group, her heart stopped. They were hiring cleaning staff for their headquarters. Low pay, quiet work, no background checks required. She leaned back in her chair, the faintest smile curling her lips. Time to clean the dirt. The morning air felt heavier than usual, like the world knew something was about to change. Ella sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the job posting on her laptop screen. The Hawthorne Group, now hiring cleaning staff. She'd read those words 100 times already, but they still made her pulse race. It had been 10 years since the ocean almost buried her. 10 years since Victoria's face vanished behind the rain. 10 years since Isabella Hawthorne had died. And now the company her father built, the company that had become her grave, was opening its doors again. Not for her name, not for her title, but for her silence. That was fine. She didn't need them to see her coming. She printed the application and filled it out by hand. No fancy resume, no mention of law degrees or schools, just the basics. Ella Brooks, age 30, cleaner, experience in maintenance work. It felt almost funny how small the words looked compared to what she knew, what she carried inside. Marla walked in holding a cup of tea. "You're really going to do it, aren't you?" Ella nodded. "It's time." Marla sighed, setting the cup beside her. "It's dangerous, child. You'll be right under her nose." "That's exactly where I need to be," Ella said softly. "People hide their secrets best when they think you're invisible." Marla studied her for a long moment. "You sound just like your father. He used to say justice isn't loud, it's patient." Ella smiled faintly. "Maybe I learned something after all." The next day she went shopping at a thrift store, picking out plain clothes, a loose gray shirt, black pants, simple sneakers. She bought a wig of short curls, dyed a shade darker than her natural hair. When she looked in the mirror, even she could barely see Isabella anymore. Just another woman in the crowd. She took the train to the city a week later. The skyline rose like cold glass teeth biting into the clouds. Every turn, every billboard, every corner had pieces of her past in it. The restaurants she'd visited with her father, the streets they used to walk. It felt like walking through a ghost town made of memories. The headquarters of the Hawthorne Group stood at the center of it all, 50 floors of steel and tinted windows. The company logo gleamed on the front doors, still carrying her father's initials, but now claimed by the woman who'd stolen everything. As she stepped inside, the marble lobby swallowed her in silence. Employees in suits moved like clockwork, their heels clicking against the floor, their laughter polished and empty. None of them even looked at the cleaner standing by the reception desk with a small bag and a folded form in her hand. The receptionist smiled automatically. "You're here for the cleaning position?" "Yes," Ella said quietly. Ella Brooks. Perfect. You'll be assigned to the upper floors once your clearance is approved. Wait in the lounge, please. Ella nodded, walking toward the waiting area. The scent of expensive perfume and coffee lingered in the air, the same blend she remembered from childhood when she'd visit her father's office. It made her chest tighten. Her eyes lifted toward the large photograph hanging behind the reception desk. A framed portrait of Victoria Hawthorne smiling like royalty. Beneath it read, CEO and Visionary Leader. Ella stared at it for a moment, her hands curling into fists. She wondered how many people knew that the woman in that picture had killed to wear that smile. Minutes passed before a middle-aged woman in a Navy uniform appeared and called her name. Ella Brooks, come with me. They rode the elevator together. The woman introduced herself as Mrs. Lane, head of housekeeping. She talked as they went over the rules. Clean quietly, avoid the executive offices unless assigned, don't make conversation with upper staff. Ella nodded through it all, memorizing every word. Every rule told her exactly where to look. They reached the 48th floor. The doors opened to polished corridors, soft lighting, and glass doors with gold lettering. Victoria Hawthorne, Chief Executive Officer. Ella's chest tightened, but she kept her face neutral. Mrs. Lane pointed to a small closet near the elevator. That'll be your supply room. You'll start with the executive floor 3 times a week, early mornings before staff arrive. Keep it spotless. The CEO likes things perfect. I understand, Ella said. As Mrs. Lane left, Ella leaned against the wall for a second, her heartbeat loud in her ears. The same halls she'd once run through as a girl were now foreign ground. Every corner, every reflection on the glass whispered pieces of her old life. That night, she began her first shift. The building was quiet, only the soft hum of machines and the echo of her footsteps. She cleaned slowly, methodically, memorizing everything. The layout, the security cameras, the files left on desks. Nothing escaped her. When she reached Victoria's office, she hesitated. Through the glass, she could see the same mahogany desk her father used to sit behind. It was hers once too, as a child who loved to scribble drawings on the edge while he worked. Now it belonged to a murderer. She stepped inside. The air smelled like lavender and ambition. She dusted the shelves, wiping around framed awards and photos. Victoria shaking hands with governors, business icons, even charity boards. Every smile was a lie. Then her eyes caught something on the corner of the desk, a photograph of her father, framed next to Victoria's own. For a moment she froze. Her reflection hovered faintly on the glass over his face, and it felt like he was staring straight at her. Her throat tightened. She whispered under her breath, "I'm here, Dad. I'm going to fix it." A noise outside made her stiffen. Footsteps. Voices. She grabbed her mop quickly and turned toward the door. 2 executives passed by laughing. "Victoria's giving another press interview tomorrow," one said. 10 years since Isabella's accident. She's donating to some scholarship in her memory. Ella's heart skipped. She waited until they disappeared, then exhaled slowly. A scholarship in her memory. Victoria was still using her death for sympathy, for power. By the end of the week, Ella knew nearly everything about the building, where the documents were stored, which executives were loyal to Victoria, which guards slept on night duty, and where the confidential files were shredded. But she also learned something else: how easily people overlooked her. They talked openly around her, complained, whispered secrets as if she were furniture. To them, she was invisible, and that was her greatest weapon. One afternoon, while cleaning a meeting room, she overheard 2 assistants talking about the company's offshore accounts. One mentioned a private accountant who visited Victoria's office every month. Another spoke of a hidden archive room accessible only by her sons. Ella memorized every word, pretending not to listen. That night, she wrote everything down in a small notebook she kept hidden inside her mop bucket. Days became weeks. Each shift felt like walking through the bones of her old life. Sometimes she'd pass Liam in the hallway. He never looked at her twice. Why would he? He thought the girl he betrayed was buried somewhere under the ocean. The first time she heard his voice again, her stomach tightened. He was talking to someone on the phone, his tone sharp. "Mother, I said I'm handling it. Don't bring up the past again." Then the elevator doors closed, cutting him off. Ella stood there long after he left, her pulse loud in her ears. The past. That was her. She was his past. The ghost they all buried. One evening, while she was wiping the glass table in Victoria's office, she noticed a faint reflection. Someone standing in the doorway. She turned quickly. Victoria. She was dressed in white this time, pearls around her neck, calm as ever. "You're new," she said, studying Ella. "What's your name?" "Ella, ma'am." Victoria tilted her head. "Have we met before?" Ella forced a polite smile. "I don't think so." For a heartbeat, Victoria's eyes narrowed. Then she shrugged and walked past her, sitting behind the desk. "Make sure the blinds are clean." "I hate fingerprints." "Yes, ma'am." As Ella turned to the window, she caught Victoria's reflection in the glass. Perfect, poised, powerful, and felt the old rage return, steady and cold. When she left that night, she sat on a bench across the street, staring at the glowing building. 10 years of patience, 10 years of silence. The pieces were finally aligning. Her phone buzzed with a new job confirmation message. Permanent cleaning staff. The Hawthorne Group. Ella smiled faintly, her breath fogging in the night air. Time to clean the dirt. Morning sunlight spilled over the glass tower of the Hawthorne Group, glinting off its mirrored windows like a monument to power. Ella stood across the street, wearing a plain gray uniform and holding a worn cleaning bag. 10 years had passed since she last saw the building. It looked taller now, colder. She could see her reflection in the glass door. Not the frightened girl she used to be, but a woman with quiet fire in her eyes. She took a slow breath. "You can do this," she whispered to herself. Inside the lobby, marble floors shone under white lights. Employees in suits hurried by, clicking through phones and holding coffee cups, never noticing the cleaners setting up their carts in the corner. That was good. Invisible people got away with everything. A supervisor, a plump woman with kind eyes and a strict voice, handed Ella a badge. "You're new, right?" "Name?" "Ella Brooks," she said smoothly. The woman nodded. "You'll be on the executive floor. Big responsibility. Don't touch anything on desks, just wipe surfaces and empty bins. The CEO's office is up there too." She hates dust. "I understand." As the elevator doors closed, Ella's heart pounded. She'd spent years imagining this day, walking these halls again, seeing what had been stolen from her family. But being here in person made it real. The walls that once belonged to her father's company now carried Victoria's empire. When the elevator opened, the air changed. The executive floor smelled like expensive perfume and ambition. Ella rolled her cart out quietly, glancing at the large portraits on the wall. Victoria in a crimson suit, shaking hands with politicians, smiling at charity galas. The caption beneath one read, "Victoria Hawthorne, visionary leader, philanthropist, mother." Ella almost laughed. "Mother," she murmured under her breath. The CEO's assistant, a young woman named Jenna, noticed her. "You must be the new cleaner. Just make sure you stay out of Miss Hawthorne's way. She's got back-to-back meetings today." "Yes, ma'am." Hours passed in quiet rhythm. Mop strokes, the soft hum of vacuuming, paper shuffling. Ella moved through the office like a shadow, memorizing faces and routines. Victoria's glass office sat at the corner, overlooking the city. Through the transparent walls, Ella saw her. Still stunning, elegant in black, with posture so perfect it looked rehearsed. She laughed softly with board members, her charm effortless. But when she wasn't smiling, her eyes turned cold and sharp, like knives hidden behind silk. During a break, Ella joined the other cleaners in the pantry. Most of them were older women sharing stories and lunch. She kept quiet, listening. That's when she met Mr. Collins, an elderly janitor with a limp and kind, weathered hands. He sat across from her, eating slowly. "You're new," he said, studying her carefully. "Yes, sir," she replied. "First day." He chuckled. "No need for sir. I'm just Collins. Been here since before the new management. Back when this place had a soul." Ella tilted her head. "You mean before Victoria Hawthorne?" He nodded, lowering his voice. "Her husband built this company on sweat and honesty. When he died, everything changed. The new boss, She runs it like a kingdom. People vanish here if they cross, her Ella leaned in, pretending to sound curious, not personal. You've seen a lot then. Colin's eyes softened. Too much. I clean the same floors, but I see things others don't. Secrets are loud when you're quiet enough. She smiled faintly. Then maybe I'll learn from you. That night, after the building emptied, Ella began her real work. She moved through the offices silently, her phone camera tucked in her sleeve. She photographed meeting notes, shredded. Ella tucked the papers away. Just trying to do a good job. He leaned on his broom, studying her. You remind me of someone I used to know. A girl who came here years ago, before the new boss took over. Smart, kind-hearted. Her name was Isabella Hawthorne. Ella's breath caught. You knew her? He nodded slowly. Everyone did. She used to visit her father sometimes. Always brought cookies for the staff. Sweet kid. The boss's wife didn't like her much. After that poor girl's accident, things changed. What kind of things? He hesitated, lowering his voice. Rumors. Her death wasn't as clean as they said, but nobody dared ask questions. Victoria controls the story around here. Ella forced a steady breath. You still believe she's dead? He shrugged. That's what the papers said. Why? Ella smiled faintly. Just curious. From that day, Collins began helping her quietly, leaving security doors unlocked, distracting guards, slipping her key cards to access restricted areas. He never asked why. Maybe he knew. Maybe he just believed in her eyes. One stormy night, while cleaning the executive wing, Ella noticed the light under Victoria's office door. Voices echoed faintly inside. She crept closer, pressing her ear against the glass wall. Ethan's voice, low, angry. You told me we were safe. Now the auditors are asking about Dad's medical records. Victoria's tone stayed calm but sharp. Relax, I took care of that years ago. You mean you paid someone off? A pause, then her voice cold as steel. I did what I had to do. He was dying anyway, I just helped it along. Ella's breath hitched. Ethan sounded horrified. You poisoned him? He was weak, Ethan. He was going to change the will. Give everything to that little girl. Do you think I'd let my sons lose everything to her? You're insane, Ethan whispered. Victoria's voice cracked slightly, angry now. You think I did all this for you? I did it because power doesn't come to the patient. It comes to the bold. And if you ever breathe a word of this, you'll join your father 6 feet under. Silence followed. Then the sound of glass clinking, footsteps, the office door shutting. Ella stepped back, shaking, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. Her hands trembled as she reached for the small recorder hidden in her uniform pocket. She pressed stop. The red light blinked once, then went still. It was all there. The confession, the crime, the proof she'd been waiting for. She slipped the recorder into her sleeve and hurried down the hall, barely breathing. Her mind spun with every possibility. She could go to the police, the media, the board. Victoria would finally pay for everything. But not yet, not until every piece was in place. She turned the corner sharply and froze. Victoria stood there, alone in the hallway, her silhouette framed by the glass walls and the glow of the city behind her. Her eyes narrowed as she studied Ella's face. For a moment, neither spoke. The air between them felt electric, dangerous. Then Victoria took a step closer. You look, she began softly, almost curious. Familiar. Have we met before? Ella's throat went dry. Her heart slammed against her ribs. Every instinct screamed to run, to hide, to fight. But she forced her body still, lowering her gaze to the floor. Her voice was calm when she answered. No, ma'am, she said quietly. I'm just the cleaner. The city was still asleep when Ella walked to the pier that morning. A thin mist clung to the water, and the air smelled faintly of salt and metal. She sat on an old bench with her phone in her hand, staring at the message she had drafted for weeks. Every file she'd collected, every photograph, every financial record, every confession was attached to the email. All that was left was to send it. Her thumb hovered over the screen. For a brief second, she felt her heart falter. Once you send this, there's no going back. She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and whispered, "For Dad." Then she hit send. The files flew into cyberspace, straight to the country's top financial crime investigators, select journalists, and one anonymous leak account known for exposing corporate corruption. Within minutes, the first ping of a reply came. Received. This will change everything. Ella slipped the phone into her pocket and stood, her reflection flickering in the rippling water. The storm she'd been building for 10 years had finally begun to move. By noon, chaos had already reached the Hawthorne group. Reporters swarmed the lobby, cameras flashing as confused employees whispered among themselves. News tickers rolled across screens. Breaking, sources allege fraud and forgery. Within Hawthorne Group, investigation underway. Auditors arrived first, escorted by officers with sealed warrants. They walked through the front doors like wolves entering a pen of sheep. Papers were seized, computers confiscated, emails locked. Victoria's office exploded in noise. Her assistant burst in, breathless. "Ma'am, the investigators—" "I know who they are," Victoria snapped, standing behind her glass desk. "Get my sons in here." Now. Minutes later, Ethan and Liam rushed in. Ethan's shirt was half-buttoned, panic written all over his face. "What's happening?" Victoria slammed a folder on the desk. "Someone leaked our financials. Offshore accounts, property transfers, everything. They're calling it forgery and fraud." "Who had access to those files?" Liam looked pale. "The accounting department. Maybe IT, or someone inside," Victoria interrupted, pacing. "Someone who's been watching us." Ethan rubbed his forehead. "Mom, you said you fixed everything years ago." "Do you think I wanted this?" she snapped, her voice sharp as broken glass. "Do you think I planned to get caught?" There was silence. For the first time, Ethan looked afraid of her. "So you did it?" Victoria's hand trembled on the desk, but her voice stayed cold. "I did what I had to do. Your father left a weak empire. I built it strong. By killing him—" Liam's voice cracked. "By killing Isabella?" Victoria froze. Her eyes darted to him, a flash of something, regret maybe, or just rage. "You don't know what you're talking about." "Oh, I do," he whispered. "I remember the night she fell. You told me it was an accident. You said she slipped." Victoria turned away. "Enough. We have bigger problems. If they find the real will, we lose everything." Outside her office window, camera flashes flickered from the street below. The world was already watching. That evening, the company board convened in the executive conference room. A dozen men and women, silent and tense. They sat around a long glass table, the air thick with fear. The auditors had demanded answers. The shareholders wanted blood. Victoria entered last, wearing her power-like armor. Red suit, chin lifted, voice calm. "I'll address the room," she said. But before she could begin, the double doors opened again. Every head turned. A woman stepped in quietly, holding a black folder against her chest. Her hair was neatly pulled back, her eyes focused, her uniform replaced by a simple gray suit. Victoria frowned. "Who let the cleaner in here?" The woman smiled faintly. "You asked where the cleaner was," she said softly. "She's right here." A murmur rippled through the room. Victoria blinked, confused. What is this?" Ella placed the folder on the table and looked up. "You owe me a decade of my life." The words hit like thunder. Liam's eyes widened. Ethan's jaw dropped. For a moment, Victoria just stared, her mind refusing to connect the face before her with the ghost she'd buried 10 years ago. Then slowly, recognition dawned. Her lips parted in disbelief. No, that's not possible. You drowned?" Ella said quietly. "You thought so." The sea tried, but it gave me back. The room fell utterly silent. Ella stepped closer, her voice steady. 10 years ago, my father's company, his estate, and his name were stolen through fraud and forgery. You told the world I was unstable. You faked his will, and you killed him." Victoria's face went white. "You can't prove any of that." Ella opened the folder and slid a small recorder across the table. She pressed play. Victoria's voice filled the room, cold, clear, unmistakable. He was dying anyway. I just helped it along. You poisoned him? He was weak. You think I'd let my sons lose everything to her? Gasps erupted. The board members exchanged horrified looks. One of them stood, pointing at Victoria. Is that your voice? Victoria stumbled back. It's fake. This is a trick. But Liam's face told the truth. He couldn't even look at her. Mom, he whispered, trembling. What did you do? Ethan slammed his fist against the table. You're going to destroy us. I built this empire for you, Victoria shouted. For all of us. Don't you dare turn on me now. But her sons were already backing away. The door opened again. Police officers and reporters surged in, cameras flashing. Victoria Hawthorne, an officer said firmly, you are under arrest for fraud, forgery, and conspiracy to commit murder. Her eyes darted from face to face, wild now. No, you don't understand. He helped me. He did it too. Who helped you? The officer demanded. She turned toward the corner of the room where a man had been sitting silently the whole time. The family's longtime lawyer, Mr. Crane, his face drained of color. She's lying, he stammered. But Victoria was already screaming, her voice breaking. He forged the will. He doctored the medical files. Ask him. He's been my lover for years. The room erupted in chaos. Reporters shouted questions. Cameras clicked. Mr. Crane tried to leave, but the officers blocked him. Both were handcuffed before the entire board. Victoria struggled, her eyes finding Ella's across the room. You think this makes you clean? You'll never have peace. You'll never... Ella's voice cut through her like glass. Peace was never what I wanted. Justice was. As they dragged Victoria away, her scream echoed down the hall. Ella stood still, her body trembling, but her eyes calm. Liam looked at her helplessly, guilt etched across his face. Isabella, he whispered, I didn't know she'd go that far. I thought... You thought lying for her made it better? She interrupted softly. You buried me with your silence. He lowered his head. I'm sorry. I don't need your apology, she said quietly. Just tell the truth now. He nodded, tears slipping down his face. Ethan didn't speak. He only stared at her as if seeing a ghost. When he finally found his voice, it was a whisper. She was right about one thing. You're stronger than all of us. Ella turned away, clutching the folder to her chest. No, she said. I just learned how to survive. The headlines spread faster than the storm that night. Victoria Hawthorne arrested in corporate scandal. Hidden will found. Daughter legally reinstated as sole heir the cleaner who spoke. The true story of Isabella Hawthorne. The world ate the story alive. The same media that had once mourned her death now praised her rebirth. Some called her a hero, others called her a mystery, but she didn't care for the labels. All she wanted was her father's name cleared, and now it was. Weeks later, she stood in what used to be Victoria's office, sunlight spilling through the tall glass. The nameplate on the door had already been changed. Isabella Hawthorne, CEO. She touched the desk lightly, her father's desk, reclaimed after all these years, and whispered, It's yours again, Dad. Behind her, Mr. Collins knocked softly. They're waiting for you downstairs, ma'am. Press wants a statement. Let them wait, she said with a small smile. For once, I'll take my time. He grinned. You've come a long way, kid. She looked at him warmly. Couldn't have done it without you. He nodded, eyes shining. You made the dirt shine. When he left, she turned back to the window. The city stretched before her, glittering and alive. Somewhere out there, Victoria sat in a cold cell, screaming into the dark. The irony wasn't lost on her. The woman who feared losing everything had lost it all. To the girl she tried to erase. Months passed. The noise faded. Reporters moved on. One evening, Isabella drove back to the coast, the same cliffs where her story had begun. The sea was calm now, gentle waves brushing the rocks. The wind carried the faint smell of rain and salt. She stepped out of her car, walking to the edge. For the first time, she wasn't afraid of the water. In her hand was a single white rose. She tossed it into the waves and watched it float away. The tide carried it softly, as if returning something once stolen. She closed her eyes and whispered, "You didn't drown me, Dad. You gave me the strength to fight," the ocean whispered back in its endless voice. She smiled faintly. "The ocean didn't drown me," she said. "It taught me how to breathe underwater." The sun dipped beneath the horizon, painting the sky golden red. Her reflection shimmered in the water. Not the frightened girl who once fell, but the woman who rose. And as the camera would fade, the last sound would be the soft hush of waves, calm, steady, endless, like justice itself.